Thank you so much. It's 5:31, and I do want us to get in the habit of always starting on time. Okay. My understanding, there's at least one task force member who has the flu. Another person could not be here, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Just bear with me one second here. I welcome everyone to our second meeting of the Special Task Force on Racial Discrimination at San Jose State University. And each task force member will start on my left and work our way around, state your name and your affiliation. And take your time so everybody can know who you are.
Okay.
Could you make sure all the mics are on, please? Thank you. Go ahead.
Linda Hayden, faculty in psychology and chair of the Academic Senate.
Rick Callender, Vice President of the California State Hawaii NAACP.
Willie Hagan, President of California State University, Dominguez Hills.
Peter Lee, third-year student and Vice President of Associated Students.
Judge Cordell, the Independent Police Auditor for the City of San Jose and Chair of the Task Force.
I'm Marcos Pizarro. I'm the chair of Mexican American Studies.
I'm Maria Luisa Alanis, faculty, sociology and interdisciplinary social science.
I'm Chris Cox, lecturer faculty in the Department of Sociology and Interdisciplinary Social Science.
I'm Gabriel Rodriguez, sociology student, third year, Associated Students, Director of Intercultural Affairs.
And I'm Delorme Maquistobal, alumni of San Jose State University and the manager of the Office of Human Relations for Santa Clara County Government.
My name is Diana. I'm a fifth-year nursing student.
Thank you. Our purpose of the task force is to review and consider the Moye fact-finding report, other documentation, and then to receive input from invited presenters, from the public at large, and then to provide recommendations to the administration. Today's agenda has been publicized throughout the university and to the general public. Before Professor Murray speaks to us, I have a few announcements. We have another task force member just arrived. You state your name and your affiliation, please, Gary.
My name is Gary Daniels. I'm the president of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, Epsilon Mu Chapter.
Did everybody hear that in the back? Could you get the mics up, please? These folks can be heard. You did not hear. Could you do it one more time? I'm sorry, Gary. One more time.
My name is Gary Daniels, president of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, Epsilon Mu Chapter.
Thank you, Gary. And we have another task force member just arrived, and it's all right if you give us your name and your affiliation. There's also food here for you all. You can grab it.
Yeah, Director of Counseling Services, Ellen Lynn.
Thank you. All right, just a few announcements. Video recordings of our meetings are archived on the task force's website. You just go to the San Jose State homepage, you type in Special Task Force on Racial Discrimination, and then you click it, and then the web page will pop up for a video feed of our meetings, and it has a link to the task force's special website. I did try it out today, and it does work. It's all good. I prepared notes from our last meeting that have been distributed to the task force members and made available to the public. If I have omitted anything or mischaracterized anything, please let me know simply by sending me an email, and I will make the corrections to the notes. We will, for the second half of this meeting, invite public comment, during which the task force members will not comment, nor ask questions, nor answer questions. Our purpose is to give our full attention to those of you who desire to speak to us. We have index cards on which we ask you to put your name and email address. If you intend to speak, it would be very helpful if you'd fill out the index cards now to save time when we begin the public forum. Our next meeting is Thursday, March 6th at 5:30 p.m. in this location, in these same rooms. I would like to suggest now, I suggest to the task force members that at our next meeting, we bring in some individuals to talk to us about the residential life program at San Jose State. And what I envision is a panel of maybe 3 or 4 individuals representing different roles. So an RA, those are in supervisory positions, somebody who heads it all up, so that we can get some information about how it all works. and we can kind of take that up in a second to see how everybody feels about that. And I suggest that we can focus on FROSH orientation, dorm assignments, training programs for RAs, and supervisory roles and responsibilities of those in the program. That's just some of the things I think we'd like to hear about. And if you task members have some names of some people that you think would be good to be representatives on such a panel, get that information to me as soon as you can, because we want to get everything lined up for the next meeting. Is everybody okay with having the next focus on residential living program? Is everybody okay? All right. All right, finally, just a word about language. For the purpose of this task force, I will not refer to the victim or the perpetrators as an alleged victim or alleged perpetrators. The fact-finding process undertaken by Mr. Moore was an administrative review, where the standard of proof was a preponderance of the evidence. This means that in arriving at his conclusions, he considered whether it was more likely than not that these events occurred. When he determined that the African-American freshman had been the victim of several bullying and racist incidents, and that certain students committed these acts, these were established facts for his administrative review. On the other hand, the criminal prosecutions that are underway utilize the standard of reasonable doubt. Has it been proved beyond a reasonable doubt that the perpetrators committed certain criminal acts? So in the criminal system, they are and continue to be alleged perpetrators, and the victim is an alleged victim until the criminal prosecution is concluded. So for purposes of this administrative review that we're doing, I believe it is entirely appropriate, and at least for me, I shall not refer to these individuals as alleged. They are victims and they are perpetrators. Okay, we have another task force member who's arrived. If you would just state your name and your affiliation.
Good evening, Tony Ross, Vice President for Student Affairs, California State University, Los Angeles.
Thank you so much, and thank you for coming up from LA.
Oh, you know it.
All right. At this time, I'm going to introduce and welcome Dr. Susan B. Murray. She is an associate professor in sociology, undergraduate major advisor at San Jose State University. Dr. Murray has a BS in sociology from Northern Arizona University, a master's in sociology from the University of California at Santa Cruz, and a PhD in sociology from the University of California at Santa Cruz. We've invited Dr. Murray to speak to us about her 2011 final student report of the Campus Climate Focus Group Research Project. Dr. Murray will speak to us for 30 minutes or less, followed by the task force Q&A with her for another 30 minutes or less, and then we will move to the second half of our meeting, which is the public forum. Dr. Murray, welcome.
Thank you. Can all hear me? I want to begin by thanking the Special Task Force for having me speak to you today, and thanking you all for your service also. I want to begin my comments tonight by contextualizing the report. Then I'm going to discuss some of my findings, and finally make some recommendations about how I think we might proceed. I will keep my comments to 26 minutes, I think, at last count, and then remain to answer your questions. The Campus Climate Focus Group Research Project was initiated at the request of the Campus Climate Committee, which was a presidential advisory group composed of faculty, students, staff, and administrators. The Campus Climate Committee originated in 1995 under President Robert Corrett as part of the university's plan to address the needs of the campus's growing ethnodiversity, which was identified in a 2002 report as, quote, having the potential for separatism and antagonism. President Corrett designed the committee to report directly to him so as to have better oversight of the proceedings. As part of the effort to assess the needs for more inclusive excellence on campus, the Campus Climate Committee, in collaboration with the Office of Institutional Research, which is now the Office of Institutional Effectiveness and Analytics, conducted 3 campus-wide campus climate surveys in 2006, 2008, and 2010. And these surveys were designed specifically to be administered at San Jose State University. So the survey data, some of which is available online, not all of it, indicated that, quote, most faculty, staff, students, and administrators report somewhat favorable or favorable perceptions of campus climate at SJSU. However, the survey data also indicated that among faculty, staff, and students, women describe the campus climate as more sexist. Gay, lesbian, and bisexual persons view the campus as more homophobic, and people of color experience discrimination based on race more than white people. So the focus group project that I undertook was designed as a follow-up study to really offer a deeper understanding of these survey results. The survey research and the focus group study were really very proactive, kind of progressive attempts to be more progressive on this campus around issues of racism, sexism, homophobia. I mean, many campuses, as you well know, approach these issues in a very reactive manner. So something happens like the incident here, and then campuses respond. Well, the Campus Climate Committee and the research that has been conducted under its direction were really all about taking action first to try to get out in front of these issues. Now, while the incident on a campus that you are convened about was very blatantly racist, much of the racism and sexism that we live around is constituted by much more subtle, unintended, if you will, microaggressions. And though we legislate civil rights and we pass policies which insist upon inclusion, we still cannot control how people think, feel, and act. And if people really keep showing up in the same way in their daily interactions, then we just keep recreating social inequalities through our actions, regardless of our intentions. So, as we stated in the executive summary, the focus group report was intended as a tool to be used proactively. We wanted to be in a position to help people be able to recognize their own unwitting collusion in supporting systems of social inequality, and to be able to help them to see and hopefully to make different choices in their daily interactions. As I explained to the administration when I first submitted my report, the report, though very difficult to read, is actually a positive step for San Jose State University. I believe that this report puts us at the cutting edge of being able to make the necessary shifts in self-awareness, which is, of course, the first step in social change. And the people that took part in the focus groups, the faculty, the staff, the students, and the administrators, really did so in this spirit of proactive, progressive action. The first step really in creating a more accessible environment is to understand from another person's perspective how that environment is currently experienced. Now, before moving on to a brief discussion of the findings, I want to make one thing very clear, and that is that the experiences of the students and the staff and the faculty in these reports are not unique to San Jose State University. These things are happening at every university and in workplaces across the country. And I think the difference here is that we were willing to look at them. So regarding the findings, in the recommendation section of the executive summary, which was authored by myself and also Damaris Brooks, who is the ombudsperson for our campus, we state, and I quote, "We encourage all persons reading this report to pay careful attention to your own reactions to the stories contained herein. Pay special attention to those places where you find yourself the most defensive, resistant, or shocked by what you read. Often the most emotionally evocative passages indicate those areas that we ourselves need to work on." Judge Cordell has asked me to speak to findings from all 6 groups. And what I'd like to do now is to pull out just some moments from each of the student reports that illustrates really, I think, the usefulness of these data in being able to provide for us a window into those spaces where campus climate is perceived as being very problematic by our students. I just will go in order that the reports appear. So from the Black student report, it's around page 15, the section in the classroom. There are a lot of quotes where the students talk about feeling like they're being asked to represent all Black people. And I'm just going to read one of them that I think captures the spirit or the essence of what they're saying. So a Black woman student says, quote, "I have no problem answering questions that are related to the curriculum, But when it comes to me being a voice for the whole African American community, that's when it's like, are you serious? Can you be a voice for your whole entire community? It just gets real frustrating to me, end quote. And it should be frustrating. The students come to our university expecting to become more educated. And in the classroom, the professor is the expert. So while we can ask our students to be experts on their own experiences, we cannot ask them to be responsible for all others in their identity category. To do so underscores the professor's lack of preparation. If I'm giving a lecture on Black family life in the US, I'm the one with the answers to the questions on contemporary Black family life, not the Black students in my class. The African American students also talked about more blatantly racist assumptions being made about them. And the next quote, I think, underscores really the complexity of finding solutions that don't recreate the problem. So on page 17 of the report, one of the men in the student group commented, quote, "I was talking with an advisor in my department, and he mentioned something about certain faculty expecting Black students to fail." Now, here's a student going to an advisor, and we want our students to go to advisors, and they resist going to advisors for a number of reasons. But here the student goes to their advisor, and the advisor tells the student, faculty expect Black students to fail. Now, we don't know the intention of this advisor. They may and probably do perceive of themselves as an ally to this student, thinking that perhaps they're giving him, some backstory or some form of the have to be twice as good speech to the student. But if you think about it in a different context, you have to question the overall supportive nature of the comment. Say you are a new faculty member or a new employee, and a senior faculty member or your supervisor says to you, people around here expect you to fail at this job. I mean, how supportive would you feel? From the gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender student group. Now, this was the first focus group that I conducted when I started the research. And since that time, the campus has made a significant progress in creating visible and institutional support systems for our LGBT students. We have an LGBT resource center. We have a Peers in Pride mentoring program. We have LGBT-themed housing. And the Student Health Center has made tremendous strides in both educating themselves and in being able to provide services for our transgender students. Having said that, though, the day-to-day microaggressions against our gay, lesbian, bisexual, and especially our transgender students continue. This is from page 35 in the classroom. So the students talked a lot about being out or not being out, which gay people talk about a lot. And they talked about being out on campus or not being out, especially with their professors. Towards the end of this discussion, one of the students, in defending the decision not to be out on campus, said, quote, "Especially if you're here on scholarship, you need to keep your insurance and all that. If a professor said, well, I don't agree with your decision or I don't agree with your expression, I'm going to fail you, well, of course you would have some sort of recourse. But who knows? It's a case of he said, she said. You don't know that you have the backup from the school. You don't know if you have protection from the school. We don't know if that professor is tenured and you can't touch them. You don't know anything about what goes on outside of that classroom. So disclosing is almost not an option." In this case, then, not knowing that they have the, quote, backup from the school speaks to the heterosexism of the larger institutional context of the university. If the overwhelming message is one that assumes cisgendered heterosexuality rather than assuming diverse sexual orientations and gender expressions from SJSU students, then the students cannot really discern who their allies are. And here again is a very teachable moment for the rest of us. Regardless of how we see ourselves in relationship to all things lesbian, gay, bisexual, or transgender, as one student articulated, quote, "Simply not being discriminatory is not enough to make a student feel safe. In order to make you feel open, a professor would have to actually go out and talk about LGBT issues and talk about race or ethnicity or ability issues in order to make you feel like that's something you could even expose." From the International and Immigrant Student Focus Group, and this is around page 52, So one of the themes that arose in the international student group was an overall sense of isolation from American students. And they talked a lot about spending more time with other international students rather than with American students. And this kind of idea of separation or segregation, if you will, is indicative of more than just this group. It was a theme that ran throughout the student groups. But another issue that came up in this focus group was around the idea of racial mapping. And so in the report, I discuss this idea of racial mapping in the classroom. And what I'm referring to here is a set of expectations from both professors and students about who is in the classroom and the significance of where they are in the classroom. And the first part of this understanding, the who part, has to do with basically having the wrong face in the wrong place. Some majors, some courses are dominated by students from particular racial ethnic groups. So when students cross into other racial territories, this is sometimes met with the question, are you sure you're in the right place? Now, as professors, we all ask all of our students this on the first day of class. But generally, again, we ask it of all the students. So I would say, this is Sociology 175, is everybody in the right place? But when a student is singled out and asked this question repeatedly, perhaps in more than one class in their major, then they start to get the underlying message that perhaps they don't belong. Regarding the second point, the where in the classroom, the international and immigrant students were very aware of racial territories in the classroom, particularly during those moments when professors dismantled them. An African immigrant student said, quote, "I'm sure professors do know that the students are racially divided in the classroom. I guess you see they realize the divisions when it's time to take the tests, because they make sure that we're, African students, between every couple of them, Vietnamese students, you know, they separate us pretty well. Some of them that are concerned about cheating." Similarly, a Vietnamese student described the following situation. Quote, "Of course the instructors, they don't say directly to you or show directly that they discriminate. But one of the instructors caught a Vietnamese student cheating, and since that day on, every time we take a test, every time that class takes a test, the teacher separates the Vietnamese students. They didn't let the students sit close together. While it was true that some of the students were cheating, don't assume that all Vietnamese students do." End quote. So in each of these cases, the classroom is perceived of as a racially divided space. And professors are perceived of as sanctioning these racial divisions unless the class is taking a test. And though we cannot know for certain the intentions of either professor, for the students in the classroom, the classroom is clearly an interactional context in where racialization takes place. From the Latino student focus group, page 63, so like the students articulated in the Black student focus group, the Latino students talked about being perceived by others through the distortion of stereotypes about Latinos and Latinas. So as one of the men commented, quote, "On a personal level, I walk around as Chicano, as raza, and I don't feel welcome here. I feel like people look at us or look at me and stereotype us right away, whether they're thinking he's a student or not, or a stereotypical gangster or a drug dealer or something." And in another instance, a Latina describes an interaction she had with an SJSU alum that was working on campus. Quote, "I've had a person in my department who is a state graduate say, and I know it was a joking matter, but I mean, you just don't say it no matter who it is. And he was like, 'Mexicans go to college? What? You guys actually like go to school?' And I'm like, yes, we do. How can he judge? You know, he's like, don't even go there, you know. He doesn't know me. He doesn't know anybody's experience. So how can he just judge, you know? I mean, I come from East LA. That doesn't mean I was ever a chola or I ever did anything wrong. I don't have any tattoos. I don't have 10 kids. So it's like, who is he to judge? Who is anybody to judge who you are by your presence, by your last name, by your language, or whatever?" And like the other student groups, the classroom for Latino students was often fraught with racial tension. In response to such tension, the students report that they find themselves, quote, "holding back, not speaking, or never expressing myself completely." In their perceptions, the consequences of not participating in class which they seem to be well aware of, were outweighed by the possible downside of saying the wrong thing. And as one student said, quote, "I know I shouldn't hold back what I have to say, but I never express myself completely. I don't want to get on, especially the teacher's bad side, because they give me the grades." From the Vietnamese student focus group, page 76. So one of the key points raised in this focus group has to do with issues of representation of Vietnamese culture and history on campus. The same theme was echoed by the white students, but in a different way, which I'll get to in a minute. For the Vietnamese students, they see the vibrant Vietnamese community in San Jose, and they see the celebration of diversity on campus, but they don't see Vietnamese culture and history being celebrated on campus. As one student said, quote, "Recently, California passed the resolution for Black April Memorial Week from April 23rd to April 30th, honoring the Vietnamese and the people that died in the war. So if campus can do a Black History Month, I appreciate on campus that we can have a week or two for the Vietnamese people or the Vietnamese students too, because that's a part of history. That's why we're here. That's why we come here." Not only do the students see themselves as missing from the diversity landscape, but they also draw on this to justify their own resistance to participating in the celebration of the diversity of others. Another student noted, quote, "I don't feel like our important holidays are being acknowledged as much here compared to other holidays, like our New Year's or Autumn Festival. I don't think many people seem to care. So I think that's why our attitude is like, we're like, well, whatever, to other cultures, or not willing to go out there and learn so much. Like during our Autumn Festival, you know, no one really talks about it. The school doesn't really bring it up. But on certain other holidays, I noticed the front page of the school newspaper. I think a lot of these little things make us, some of us feel, you know, why be so involved?" And finally, from the white student focus group. The white students valued diversity. They articulated a colorblind racial position that for them translates into a social justice perspective. Similar to the Vietnamese students, the white students did not see themselves as having a place at the diversity table at SJSU. But unlike the Vietnamese students, however, they had no examples of white culture to offer that they felt were worthy of celebration. So the comments were some as, quote, "There's really nothing good to say about being white," or "You can't say, I'm proud to be white." One student commented before this, the focus group session, "I've never seen anything at San Jose State that said, you know, like a white community type thing, where there's an Asian community club or something like that. You can't have a white club or something like that because that's called the KKK." So talking about whiteness, celebrating whiteness, or taking pride in one's racial history is clearly off limits for most white people. The students know this, and they understand the consequences for this type of behavior. As one of the students' athletes articulated, quote, "There's all kinds of clubs for different cultures and stuff, but there's nothing. It would be considered racist if there was some kind of club just for white people. It's just the same thing like with our country. We have Hispanic Pride or Black History Month, Black Pride, but if we had a White Pride Month, it would be considered racist." So the white students, in other words, don't see how they can contribute to diversity as white people. So as for my recommendations, I think we have a lot of work to do on the campus. But let me point out that for every issue raised in these student groups, the corresponding focus group reports from the faculty, the staff, and the administrators raise equally compelling examples of racism, sexism, and heterosexism. I think that the students are a big part of campus climate, but I think that the faculty and the staff and the administrators are an even bigger part. The students come and go, and we stay here. How can we really hope to pass on what we do not have and what we have not been able to commit to create among ourselves? If our colleagues are experiencing and perpetuating oppression, then I believe that this is where we need to start. You know, our students are doing their work. I mean, they do it at Leadership Today. They do it in a number of programs through Mosaic and other offices on campus. They're doing it in many of our classrooms. Our students are very, very brave. You know, they are so willing to go to the hard places with one another. And we can certainly give them more, but my main recommendation is that we create diversity training for faculty, staff, and administrators. And I urge everyone on the task force to take a look at the faculty, staff, and administrator report, which you can find on my website. So it's linked to my website. I also recommend that engagement in diversity work and diversity research be explicitly tied to the retention, tenure, and promotion process for faculty, and that such work be considered as scholarly and be rewarded as such at all levels of the review process. And finally, my last recommendation comes from the disband but continuing to meet Campus Climate Committee. We would like to see an Office of Campus Diversity established with a campus diversity officer with enough power, resources, and staff to really coordinate and oversee the activities and efforts on our campus towards making this a more inclusive university. Thank you. Those are my comments.
Thank you so much. So what we'll do now for the next 30 minutes is turn to our members of the task force. If you have any questions of Dr. Murray, and I prefer that maybe you hold your comments a little bit because we want to use her time to talk more about the issues. You know, it's been brought to my attention, and I'm just going to put this out there, that the student representatives on our task force maybe we're feeling a little bit of intimidation because of others here who are old like me, who maybe are kind of talking more. So I really want us to be very sensitive to our student members on this task force because their input is just as important as everyone else's, okay? So, and if you have several questions you'd like to put to Dr. Murray, I'll ask you to just put one out and then we'll come back so everybody has a chance. So, Rick, you had some list of questions you told me earlier, so why don't you just start with one and then we'll anybody else who's ready.
I have a specific question. In your report, you'd interviewed, it was from the LGBT community, and one of the things that I found most interesting was a comment. It says, but my probably most unwelcoming experience was in the freshman dorm housing. There is very little sensitivity put in by the housing services to really make sure that you're comfortable with who your roommates are. They go on to say, and this goes beyond the LGBT experience, I believe I had roommates that were literally racist and used the N-word as well as the F-word, fag, and it's just a very difficult experience. The question I have from this is, were there other themes identified during your research related to campus housing experience, related to the campus housing experience?
You know, not specifically. Actually, it was really only, I think, in that focus group where they talked about campus housing. Most of the students talked about classroom experiences, and I mean, and that's partly because of the students in the focus groups. That's their common denominator for a lot of them. So yeah, there weren't, I can't really think of any other references to the housing piece, except in that focus group.
Okay. Anybody else? Keep
I do.
going here. Go ahead, Anthony.
Dr. Murray, good evening. And I want to say that I want to start out by saying I applaud this report because it's so rare that you get a chance to hear the students' voices in a period of relative calm, okay? And you did that, and the committee pulled that off. So, you know, I applaud you for the report in that regard. You ended your comments with 3 recommendations to us. And I wonder if there were recommendations made as a result of the report that was shared with the administration or whomever prior to tonight, because in what we received, I didn't see any recommendations. And normally when you do a report such as this, and as thorough as this is, it's laced with recommendations.
Yes, there were no specific recommendations attached to the report. So I was tasked with undertaking the research and presenting it back to the Campus Climate Committee, who then was, in turn, would present it back to the executive committee. And, you know, my intention in writing the report was really to go out there and represent what is and try to contextualize it in terms of the current academic literature to illustrate that the things that are happening here are indeed, you know, we see patterns of that in other institutions. But I wasn't necessarily tasked with making those recommendations. I was assuming that the report would be taken up and recommendations would be made as a result.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Gary.
Dr. Murray, I want to say thank you for joining us today and speaking on your very good report. at the end, you made 3 recommendations based off your own personal experience with the campus climate report. You said diversity training for faculty, staff, and administrators, engagement in the tenure, diversity engagement in the tenure process, and an Office of Campus Diversity. In these suggestions, I don't see anything that directly has to do with students. You just said that students talk a lot about classroom experience. They deal a lot with actual racist students using the N-word or the F-word. And as Mr. Callender brought to light, that in the report it also states that there's lots of negative experiences in the freshman dorms. I'm wondering if you had to add a 4th suggestion that had specifically to do with student interactions, what would that suggestion be?
Well, I mean, I use these reports in my own work, in my own classrooms. So in the work with students in my introduction classes at all level, I have them reading the reports. We do workshops, educational activities around the report. So for students, I mean, I think that there's a lot that we can do, not specifically with these, but in helping the students and training the students and do more things like Leadership Today, things like that. But as I said, I think the students, I mean, I think there's more that we can do with certain groups of students for sure, but the students are doing a lot of work. I mean, there is so much going on this campus around issues of diversity and training, and the students seem to be quite enthusiastic about participating in that. And so that's why I refer my comments to the faculty and the staff and the administrators, because we don't really have any continuing training for faculty and staff or administrators around these issues.
Okay, I'm going to throw in a question for you. On page 97 of your study, I found something, I don't know if I was surprised by it, but let me just read it. A word count of the white student focus group transcript reveals that 71% of all references to students of color were made about Black or African American students, compared to references to Asians, 13%, Hispanics, 12%, Filipinos, 4%. This overwhelming focus on Black-white interactions is especially problematic, given that Black students only make up 4% of the student body at SJSU. What is all that about?
Well, I mean, I think that in the kind of the white psyche of racism, I think that given the history of racism in the United States, that I think Black people figure large in that, in kind of white perceptions of racism, and that's why, you know, they continually kind of come up. I mean, and they come up in the other student focus group comments also, much more so than any other racial or ethnic group. And I mean, I think it's just this legacy of racism within our country that still is alive and well today.
Other questions? Anything else? Yeah, go right ahead, Rhea.
I also want to thank Professor Murray for her excellent report and presentation. And I want to refer to a very poignant statement you made on page 52. Within the institution of education, the classroom is the primary public stage upon which the university life is enacted. By definition, the faculty are the role models. The faculty perpetuate the organizational culture in this institution. And I lament what I read in terms of students not feeling that they can trust faculty, feeling that faculty are not their support system on this campus. And I just want to share a personal experience that I had a couple of years ago. My nephew was a student here at San Jose State. He came to my office one day, he left a class, and he said, "Promise you won't tell anybody what I'm going to tell you." And I said, "I promise." And he said he was the only Latino in a class, and the professor called him Poncho in class. And said, "I used to have workers like Poncho here working for me when I had a business." And what I shared with some of the other task force members is that he wasn't angry, he was sad. And I feel sad sharing that story because I can only imagine how the parents of this young man feel, who went through such an egregious experience. My nephew was called Poncho, and it was extremely hurtful. But I think that faculty, staff, we need to be very, very conscious of not only the content that we're teaching, not only the curriculum, but the affective domain in terms of our work. So that's basically what I wanted to share.
Yes, Linda. Sorry.
I just have a quick question, actually, clarification. I believe the report was based on the 2006 survey data, correct?
Well, this report came out as a result of them analyzing the 2006 data, yes.
Okay, I was just curious if you may or may not know, the subsequent data that was collected to the surveys, 2008, 2010, were there any significant differences amongst them in any direction?
I can't really say right offhand, and I don't really have access to the 2008 and 2010 data, yeah.
On page 67, you note that the Latino faculty, 6% of faculty is Latino. And I was looking in the section on African American students, and I did not see any reference to the percentage of faculty who are African American. I didn't see that in your report. Do you know what that number is?
I don't know it right today. In the faculty, I don't know it offhand. In the focus group report on faculty staff, I have all those statistics in there.
Do you believe it? Is it less than or greater than the 6% Latino representation? Do you have any notion? Does anybody?
I think it's less than.
Probably less than.
It is very much less than 6%. I don't know the statistics, but if I count, which I can do, which usually tells you that there's a small number.
The
Got it.
fact that you can
Okay.
count it makes complete sense.
Other questions? Rick, go ahead. All right, go ahead. Marcos, no, you go.
Thank you, Susan, for being with us. Really appreciate it. It's just so helpful to have this for us in our work. I have a couple of methodological questions, so I'm going to geek it out as a professor. I'm wondering, so it says that there was an attempt to match the focus group participants with the interviewer. And I'm wondering, particularly thinking about the African-American student situation, were those focus groups led by African-American interviewers? And if not, what do you think the impact was on the findings that happened in the group?
Yeah, the Black student focus group was facilitated by a Black professor.
Great.
Rick.
One of the things that you touched on was actually one of the questions that I had was there a faculty administration report? I wish I had had the opportunity to read that. I probably would have had additional questions. Now, one of the things that you pointed to in your initial comments was that this was done at the behest of the Campus Climate Committee. Were these reports, both the student and the faculty administration report, were those turned over to that committee for consideration?
Yes.
What recommendations then came out of as the action? Were there any actions that came as a result of those reports being given to them?
Yeah, as a result of that, so I finished the reports in December of 2011, and so the spring of 2012, myself, along with Wigsy Severson, who is the chair of that committee, and Damaris Brooks, we conducted several workshops throughout the spring for different staff and groups that requested them. So we did a workshop for the EOP program, we did a workshop at the student conduct, we did a workshop at the Student Affairs Annual Professional Development Day, and then we did another one at the Gender Equity, Diversity in Athletics for the GDAT committee.
You follow up? Sure.
Yes. So there were just workshops, but there was no recommendations that were forwarded to the administration. I'm assuming since this committee reported directly to the administration that they were aware of the content of the report as well as some of the findings within the report. So there were no actions taken from the administration or anyone else outside of the workshops?
Well, I wasn't really privy to any of the conversations at the administrative level, so I don't know.
Thank you.
Okay, Diana.
So I just
I have a question pertaining to your data. I can tell I know you had 13 focus groups. I just want to know how it arrived to the groups itself, because there are many, many different other groups that are not represented in the focus groups itself. So I know you began data collection in 2009. And I just want to know how you put the word out there to get these students. I know you said in your report that you advertised through classrooms and everything, but I was a student during this time as well. So I never heard of that, and this would have been a wonderful thing to be a part of. So I just wanted to know how it arrived and how other groups were not represented.
Right.
kind of.
Well, the committee itself came up with the different focus groups, and partly it was a limitation of, it was me doing all the work, so voluntarily. So it was, there was many, many more groups that we could have done and could do that were left off the list, and simply for a matter of time and resources, really. We used a number of different ways of recruiting students for these, and generally with flyers, and then going into different classrooms, and again, just collecting students, having them sign up if they wanted to participate in things like that.
Do you have a follow-up? Go ahead.
Yeah, so was it just that you went off the campus data of the populations, and then I could say how they picked the minority groups that were to be focused on, I assume?
It was somewhat of that, and it was somewhat about being able to recruit people in a timely manner and to get these things taken care of. So, yes, it was partly about the numbers of students.
Okay, so was it like a first come, first served basis, I'm sorry, basically on what kind of students signed up, and then you picked the group, or it was?
Oh, no, we advertised specifically for groups, yes.
Okay.
Ellen?
Question.
I'll get to Ellen, and then Willie.
Oh, great.
Ellen, go ahead, and then Willie.
Thank you, Susan, for this wonderful report and taking the time to come to us and actually taking all those years to put it all together. It's a lot of wonderful information. I agree with your recommendations. I also want to acknowledge also Gary's question about training students. But I also heard that what you said is we need to train our faculty, staff, and administrators so that they could then turn around and train the students. Knowing the challenges on this campus of doing this type of training, I'm wondering if you would, often the trainings are to the choir, or who shows up, right? So I'm wondering if you might have a suggestion on how that may be implemented on a campus.
Yeah, I wish I did. I think it has to come from the top, right? I think that the institution itself and the people at the top have to make a commitment and have to tie it, especially in regards to faculty. For staff, there are a number of trainings for, I think staff get a lot more training than faculty do, or additional training. But for faculty, it has to be tied to the RTP process. You have to make it mandatory, and of course, our contract, I think, doesn't allow us to do mandatory additional education, but if it was very explicitly written into the things that are expected of us as faculty, and seen as part of our really scholarly duties to have this kind of training, because this is a public institution and we are here to serve the public, that I think that might go a long way in starting and having participation in these things.
Interesting. Okay, Willie?
When your report was completed, and I assume it was public and everyone had a chance to read that report, I'm just curious, as you were wandering about campus, running the faculty colleagues, what was just the general response to the report that you were hearing?
Well, unfortunately, the report did not get widespread distribution.
Okay.
So the faculty that read it, were very favorable about what they were heartened by seeing the report. I think that's one of the things, in the faculty and staff and administrative groups, the sentiment, I think, was, we will participate, but is anything gonna come of this participation? And I turned in the report to the Campus Climate Committee, and as I said, we took it upon ourselves to do some work with it, and I've incorporated it into my classes, and as I know some of my colleagues have. But I don't have any means to distribute it. I just put it on my website and turned it over to the executive committee, and I don't know what they did with it.
You mentioned earlier that the Campus Climate Committee is defunct.
Yes.
Was that a committee that had a preset lifespan, or was there a reason it no longer does what it's doing?
I believe the current president sunsetted the committee in,
Okay.
I have a...
pardon? No, it was this president sunsetted it, yes.
One-
We got a memo that said the committees.
One theme that is very strong, at least with the sections with Latino students and African-American students, is the sense that not seeing someone in the classroom, a professor that looks like them, makes them feel perhaps not wanted, and then there's all these other negative offshoots. And on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being the least effective, and 10 being the most effective in improving campus climate, at least with respect to students of color, how important is representation in the classroom that is professors who are of color? Where do you put that?
I'd say that's a 10, definitely. I mean, I think it really matters who's in front of the students, and for a student to believe that it's possible, you have to have role models that are showing you that it's possible. And, you know, throughout the student focus groups, particularly the students of color, for them, you know, having faculty of color in front of the classroom, seeing them be successful, have successful lives, you know, that to them was such a shining beacon, if you will. And I also think on a campus like this, I mean, then the faculty of color are like overburdened in some ways with being that person for a lot of the students of color. So I think that we definitely need to hire more faculty of color representative to our students and the people that are here.
We have about 6 minutes. Okay, Delorme?
Susan, I also want to thank you for this report. I found it really profoundly interesting. I've read it 4 times now. I guess it's because it's so tied to the work that I do in the community. But, you know, whenever I do this work, I always have one question. You know, the information you provided was profound because it was first person. Is there a will that you sensed in all these conversations for there to be change on campus?
Well, it really depends on who you talk to. I mean, I think that there is a will. I mean, we have a kind of a deeply dedicated faculty and staff and students to change it, but I don't know if it's I don't know how many. I mean, obviously I can't speak for everybody. I think that I'm really very heartened by this special task force and whatever recommendations that you take, and having the camera on San Jose State in this manner. I think that, you know, if we have the impetus to move forward here.
We have time for 2 more, Gary, and then Marcos, and that's it.
Again, you spoke a lot about faculty interactions, but in regards to students and student-to-student interaction, would you consider making cultural studies courses mandatory as relevant, you know, training for student-to-student interaction? What do you think about that?
I mean, I think that definitely we could make some requirements of students having particular classes. I think that we do. I mean, that is part of the intention of the GE and the different GE areas. I think that we can do more. You know, and all of the students that in these focus groups, I mean, one of the things that students want is they want the university to facilitate cross-racial interaction and to be able to help facilitate, you know, that ally work. And so we do, and I keep referring to Leadership Today because it's this amazing kind of experience where that happens, but it's only 40 students once a year. And having been to Leadership Today twice, I mean, the students there have so much will to want to move through these issues. I think providing more training, more resources like that, which is it's a 3-day retreat paid for by the university, housed off campus, where the students kind of do that processing and do that work really intensely with staff mostly. So I think the students would be very willing, and I think we could, if we would provide it for them, I think that that would be a move in the right direction. Marcos?
So just a comment on that, as somebody who teaches ethnic studies, and I get a lot of students of color, and they get a lot out of the class, but a lot of the white students who come into those classes often feel like they're not sure why they're there because they had to or just fit, and they end up being maybe the most transformed of everybody in the class. So just food for thought. Susan, I wanted to ask you if you could, I mean, 2 things about this. It's 5 years old when the data was collected. So just your thoughts on how campus climate might have changed in any way that you've seen. And I know that's a little bit of just youth, just eyeballing it, but that piece of it. And also, you had a different charge than we do in collecting the data, and so I'm wondering if you think that there's information you would have, in light of what we're looking at, you would have liked to have gathered that you hadn't gathered, because maybe that also shaped the types of comments that we get, information that we just don't have that you think we need.
Yeah, I'm not really sure what you're asking me, Marcos.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if I mean, your report, you had a certain focus,
Right.
And our charge is, I think, slightly different, although they're related. And I'm just wondering if you feel like, you know, if I was going to do that study now, this is the kind of questions I would ask. This is the kind of information that we need, especially given that it is 5 years later. And again, so those 2 questions were kind of related.
But let me add on to that. I mean, I think the logical thing is, I mean, do you see any value in doing an updated study?
There would be some value in doing an updated study and certainly thinking about the inclusion of different groups and perhaps including a white faculty, staff, and administrator group also in that. I don't know that things have significantly changed.
Then what would be the value of an updated study? If you're
Well, I think that there are some groups, I think that a study like this is a great teaching tool, and it's a great way to teach people at all levels. And you can triangulate the issues and not make anyone then, of course, be the spokesman for their position. And so I think that that can be very, very useful.
Would you be willing to undertake such an updated study?
Give her some release time.
Yeah, okay.
Well, I didn't say for free. I'm just saying, would you be willing to?
I might
mean,
consider it.
You're certainly poised with the expertise to be able to do that, to pick up what we're doing. So, okay. So we're about, no,
Okay.
I want to give the public time. Anthony, go ahead. Is there anybody else?
I just had a point of data
All right, it's got to be really quick, because I don't want to take away from the public time. So go ahead,
Yeah,
Chris, and then.
I just wanted to very quickly clarify, because I found the data on the racial breakdown of the faculty. And as of 2011, it was 3.3% of the faculty are black.
I just, Judge just had a brief comment, and not really, you mentioned some things, but not really targeted at you. But just the general statement from a standpoint that you mentioned the psyche of racism in America, and we all understand that. I think it's important to note, because it was pointed out that there was concern about when certain groups of people get together and how that's perceived by others. And let me tell you, when people get together, it's a taste of home. Should not be construed as segregation. Should not be construed as anything other than I want to talk to those and be around those with whom I'm familiar with and I'm comfortable with, be they students, be they African American, be they, when I travel abroad and I see an American and run into them, we may not talk McDonald's, but it's nice to speak English to someone when I'm in a country I don't understand. So that taste of home is so important. And on a college campus, when we see those, and you've read Beverly Tatum's Why Do All the Black Kids Sit in the Cafeteria, sit together in the cafeteria, that's what it's about, taste of home. I may be in a foreign territory, but I love the fact that I can go and when I'm in a different community, I want somebody that can cut my hair, okay? Or I want to be able to hear the music that I like to hear. So the taste of home is so important, and I just think I want to put that out there, and it's
Okay.
not lost in
Got it.
in what we're talking about.
Yeah, all right. So Dr. Murray, Professor Murray, Dr. Murray, thank you so much for your time. I have a request. The request is that if you would put in writing your recommendations, and if you just send them to me, then I will make sure they go to the task force. And I'd like the recommendation and then the rationale for it, if you know what I mean, on each of those. So I'd greatly appreciate it if you would do that for us. And I hope that you will make yourself available should we want to have further conversations with you. And I hope you will think seriously, if one of our recommendations is an updated study, that I think you would be the one to do it. But anyway, I just hope that you'll certainly keep that as a possibility. So thank you very much on behalf of the task force.
Thank you.
All right, it is now 6:32, and we will use the second half of our task force meeting for a public forum. It is my expectation that every person who speaks to us this evening will not only receive our full attention, but our respect, regardless of your speaker's viewpoints. This meeting place offers to everyone a safe place to speak. It's not easy to engage in the soul-searching that we are undertaking on the most difficult of subjects, race, and to do so in such a public fashion. And for those who prefer not to speak publicly, I invite you to write your comments on index cards that we will provide to you, and please write legibly. If we are unable to read your writing, your comments are of no value to us. We invite you to include your name and your email address should any of our members desire to follow up with you. But should you choose not to include your name or contact information, that's fine too. For those of you who will speak to us this evening, will you please legibly write your name and an email address on an index card so that we will have a record of who has spoken to us and so that we can follow up with you if we have the need to do so. And of course, if you are not comfortable giving us this information, that's fine. You are still welcome to speak to us. The focus of this meeting is campus climate, tonight's meeting, so I ask that you speak to us about that subject. We will have at least one more public forum, perhaps two, for comments about other topics. Now, each speaker, it depends tonight on how many want to speak, will have 3 minutes. I may have to make it 2 minutes. I'm trying to get a sense. Could folks raise your hands for me and let me know who would like to speak tonight? Then I can get a sense of what we're talking about. So if that's it, we can do 3 minutes, because when we have an hour, I want to make sure everybody gets heard. My view is 2 minutes, you should be able to get your point of view across in 2 minutes, quite frankly. But let's just see how it goes, but I may have to shorten it to 2 minutes depending upon how many of you want to speak. So also understand, I will stop you at that 3 minutes. You're done, okay? And so that means you will politely take your seat or stand along the side and the next person will speak. All right? So if any of you, yes. So I do want to make sure we hear from a mix of people, from students, from staff, faculty. And we encourage you to speak, so let's get started. We have now just about an hour. So do we have index cards already filled out? Are there any, they're not? Yes, they have. Okay, if you have your cards, it's fine, and let's have a process by which we hand, could they hand them? Sure. So let's do this, if it's okay. Let's take some students first, and make sure students get heard. And I'm not going to monopolize it. There will be others who will be permitted to speak. Let's do the first 5 speakers. Let's go with students, and then we can open it up. Is that all right with everybody, just to make sure people get heard? And where do you want them to put the index cards now? All right, so you'll hand them to Dorothy Poole. Okay, first person up, and please talk into the microphone. And starting now, you have 3 minutes. Go.
Okay. Hi, I'm a student here, and I'm really confused and really concerned about a few things. And the first one is that I believe that there are integral parts of this conversation that is missing from this panel, and inviting them to come for 20 minutes isn't suffice. between last meeting and this meeting, there was a lot of questions about housing and RA training, and I'm just confused as to why there's no RA on the panel or even a professional housing staff that can answer these questions. There was also questions about student policy complaints and procedures. So I'm also confused as to why a representative from student conduct isn't part of this panel. And then there was also questions and comments about university policies and stuff that would go through UPD, and they also conducted the initial investigation. So I'm confused as to why they're not part of the panel. And I just think that any recommendations that are made has to include those people within the conversation. It's not enough to just invite them for 20 minutes because you don't get to ask all the questions that you want to have. They should be part of the conversation and the decision making and not an afterthought. I read the campus climate report, and one of my concerns is that, particularly on page 15 with the black students, they say that they feel like whenever there's a black issue, they feel like they're called upon to be the representative or the expert. And it seems like since every committee that has been formed since the hate crime, they're calling on the same 3 to 5 black students to represent all black students on this campus, and that's not okay. Additionally, on about page 85 with the white students, they say they're not included in conversations about race and diversity. And I'm just concerned about how serious the administration is going to take these recommendations that are put forth by this panel if they're perpetuating the same issues that were talked about in the campus climate to begin with. I'm also concerned with the gender imbalance with this panel that has been put forth. I'm also concerned with the fact that there doesn't appear to be any like Middle Eastern Arab type representatives on this panel. So it just—
3 minutes is up. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Next person, who'd like to speak? Next person up, we're losing time. Anyone else want to speak? Then I won't take a student, I'll take someone else unless we have a student. Okay? Sure. All right. You may begin. Go right ahead.
Hi, my name is Susan. I have 2 questions. One is in regards to the report on international students. I want to know if it went kind of deeper in terms of like knowing where each international student came from. And the reason why I ask of this is because I have been talking to South Asian students. In fact, I just found an organization called the South Asian Advocacy Group. And when I have talked to a few of the international students straight from India, one of them told me, and I think it's important to keep in mind, he's of the Sikh religion, and they wear the turban, the dasar, and he was called a terrorist. And I mean, this is not a welcoming environment for those students, and it just really hurts to see this happening. But the thing is that no one knows about it. They'll always talk about it amongst their own kind. So I want to know if the international students were specified. And where was I going about this? Well, I'll just go on to my second request. I request that there's investment in the history department. We are lacking diversity in that department. I see all different kinds of students and faculty, yet there are no history courses that represent where they came from, their histories. And I, as a South Asian, and I see so many South Asians, how come there aren't any history courses on us? We're talking about the racial climate, campus climate right now. How come there aren't no African American studies, like history courses for them? This is very problematic. I mean, there's like a course on modern Israel, but there's none on modern South Asia, and present day like Black American history. And yeah, I think that's basically it. Diversity in the history department, more courses. We need more investment in the history department, and I say this as someone who's getting an MA in history. And the other thing is that I really want to see, I guess, more studies on South Asians and other and international students, because I mean, being called a terrorist and being intimidated is not okay. We should not feel threatened. And that's it.
Thank you. Next student. Right ahead.
Hello. I had a bad spot, so I couldn't really see who was in the audience, but it's pretty much what I thought it would be. There doesn't seem to be many Caucasian or white students here, and I don't know at what point it's going to become an issue for them, or if this is just solely for persons of color, but I feel like they're definitely a part of the conversation, and I don't know what means the administration is taking to outreach to them to bring them into this conversation, but I desperately and strongly need for them to be a part of this conversation. I need them to be in this audience. I don't know if they're watching on the internet. I hope they are, because they're sure not here. In addition to that, I'm a second generation Spartan. My son will be here in 5 years. That was the plan, at least. It concerns me because 5 years ago, we had Gregory Johnson Jr., who supposedly committed suicide. His parents don't believe so. We've had 5 incidences regarding African-American males on this campus within a 1-mile radius, all suicides. Their parents don't think so. I'm a parent. I don't want to be one of those parents. I don't want to come here and not believe that this school is here to serve my children. In regards to the housing, and last week it seemed like it was an attack on the RAs, and it's all the RA's fault. If I bring my kid here, nobody's going to tell me it's the RA's fault. I'm putting you responsible for my child, my only child, no pointing fingers, no pointing fingers. If the RAs are at fault, then you're at fault, because you told me that they could take care of my child. No excuses. I think the administration needs to be a little more honest with what's going on here. I don't want to come bring my child here. I'm actually considering breaking the tradition. 3rd generation Spartan, maybe not. I don't feel that my child will be safe here. I need them to do something about that.
Thank you. Next person, do you have any other? Okay, we'll keep it open for 2 more students, and we'll open up to everybody. Yeah, make sure you pull it up. Thank you.
Can you guys hear me all right?
All right, go right ahead.
All right, so I'm coming here as an RA, actually, so I can't speak specifically about issues, but I can say that the last person did mention how many white people or Caucasian people are not here, but let's also look around and see how many black students are here, and it's not too many. And it's a problem that we are having as a university, so where black students are also not responding to what we need them to do for their voice to be heard. And it's a common issue also in housing, to where we would have a program, but we're not getting support, or we're not getting the black attendance, because we do take attendance at programs that we need, and ultimately their voice is not heard. I'm a black student, so I speak as a student, I speak as an RA, I speak as a student of this university. There's a lot that we're not looking at, and unfortunately it doesn't even come up in this task force because, like Ashley said, we don't have a black, I'm sorry, not a black student, we don't have a black, we don't have a resident advisor, we do not have anybody from housing here, we don't have anybody from student conduct. No one here who actually knows enough about housing to be able to comment on housing. So I do question, how are we gonna get our goals met if it seems like a lot of people here are ignorant to housing in general, or even the black community, and who is here to represent the black community, and how was that person picked? How were you all picked? And how are we going to make sure that we get things done? It's a lot of things I'm seeing are just, it's saddening at this point, because I'm not sure where we're headed, or if we have, as a task force, the competency to get to where we need to get at this point. Can I get a time check?
You're good. You have 1 minute.
1 minute?
1 minute, 6:45.
I also wanted to talk about the look of the committee. Let's remember that we're representing San Jose State as a whole. This is going out to the whole country. We need to look as professional as possible. That's how we respond. That's how we act. That's where our placement is. There are a lot of things. This meeting is a little better, but as a committee, we need to realize that we are representing San Jose State. And even down to, if we're going to have a professional committee like this, honestly, eating isn't going to cut it. We need to have that done beforehand. We're a committee. So that's all I have to say for now.
Okay,
And,
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. You know, out of respect for those speaking here, those in the audience, I'm asking you to please keep your applauding, your comments, your laughing. Just please do not do that. That's out of respect for everybody here. Please. All right, we have speaker number 5. Do we have another student? If not, that's fine. It's fine. Just come up. Come up. Who's next? Come. It's fine. All right, go right ahead.
Hi, good evening. My name is Roxana Marishi. I'm an associate professor of education here at San Jose State, and my research focuses on school climate and violence prevention. Some of the questions that we ask in this field are, what approaches work and what approaches don't work in efforts to keep students safe in schools? Unfortunately, one of the most popular immediate reactions after a high-profile incident is that in a rush to demonstrate action, That first response is this echoing of the phrase zero tolerance. Again, while this is likely well-intentioned, I'd like to caution you that there are serious negative unintended consequences that can result with this specific approach. In the long run, it can put minority students at greater risk for being targeted. The American Psychological Association Task Force on Zero Tolerance has found that not only is zero tolerance ineffective as a deterrent, in many cases it makes matters worse. By having a highly fear-based, high-stakes, inherently punitive environment where the full spectrum of problematic behaviors are criminalized, then people are actually far less likely to come forward with a request for assistance, a complaint, or to even acknowledge that an issue is occurring. The fear of the consequences often stops them from taking action as a first step to intervene, and then the issue goes more underground. True prevention rests on relationships. It emerges out of difficult dialogues, courageous conversations, and people getting to know one another on a human, vulnerable, and real level. This can happen. There are organizations that help with facilitating such dialogues. Immediately after the incident, I referred to the university administration, one of these organizations. It's called Not in Our Town, Not on Our Campus. This is a nonprofit whose work is to create healing, connection, and community in the midst of tension, conflict, and as Dr. Murray mentioned, microaggressions. There are other organizations as well, and I encourage you to explore these resources further in your recommendations. Someone had mentioned at the last meeting to create a culture where people are empowered to stand up when they see something that's not right. Yes, absolutely, this is a prevention approach that does work, and it's backed by the research literature. This is called bystander intervention, and we've all seen it in action, and again, there's a lot of data to support this as an approach. So to sum up, I'd just like to urge serious caution around the inaction of any zero tolerance type approaches. Well-intentioned as they may be, they are more likely to harm students than they are to help them. If you want to focus on prevention, we need to focus on people and to foster cross-cultural understanding and community.
Time is up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, may I just add one thing to the report
Time's
now?
up.
Okay.
Thank you. You can always submit a written comment. If you have a written comment, you can just put it and email it to us. All right, go right ahead.
Good evening. I'm Gil Villagran. I'm a lecturer in the School of Social Work here. I've been here for about 20 years. After 30 years of social work here in Santa Clara County, and I just wanted to state very clearly that I was a participant as a facilitator in the Leadership Today several years ago with Chris Cox and many other people. We went to Asilomar for 3 days. We had about 50 students and about 25 facilitators, faculty and staff, and it was wonderful. It was a wonderful experience. It's exactly what this previous speaker was saying, and it was coordinated also with the organization Not in Our Town, where we actually had this experience. Let me just mention one thing that we did. You may have been participating in something like this. So the main facilitator said, if you ever been called a nasty word, stand up. Almost everybody stood up. If you've ever been omitted from some event that you wanted to go to, stand up. And then it got a little heavier. If you've ever been sexually abused, stand up. And some people stood up. And then gradually, as we talked about it, more people stood up. And then more people stood up. And then gradually, many people began to cry. And I cried too. I didn't do that. I didn't suffer that. But other people did. And I've worked with people that have. So gradually, we had about 100 people that were crying and holding hands. And we realized that we have all the same basic needs, and we have all been abused by this society that abuses people right and left. So that experience is something that every student and every faculty should go through in some way. And we could do that. We have the ability to do that. We don't have to go to Asilomar for 3 days. We can do it right here at our campus. So let me just put a plug for Leadership Today. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Thank you. When I heard this on National Public Radio, I was outraged. This is not just a university issue. It doesn't just refer to a particular group, race, or gender. This is a national issue, even an international issue. We've had these kinds of problems for centuries. I mean, look at the yellow peril of the 19th century. Look at the the KKK, and not just here, but there was that lynching in the 1930s in San Jose, for example. This thing's been going on for many years, and now it's still happening. When will society grow up? What we have to do is really educate people more about particular ethnic groups' traditions, whether it's Chinese, Vietnamese, the Italian culture, the Zulu tribe in Africa, everywhere. We have to understand people as human beings and respect them as human beings. Because there's no excuse for this kind of garbage. And I can get into male aggression, and that's a myth as far as I'm concerned. So really, I think the question I have, and this would be in the area of interest to the DA's office, if there were any markings on that person, what you call them, victim or whatever you want to refer to them as, if there's any kind of markings, disfigurement, that is a legal term. It's called mayhem. Mayhem is not chaos. It's a disfigurement of any kind, or aggravated mayhem. I refer you to Penal Code sections 203 and 205. So this is my question and my suggestion, that we really need to understand people and their different cultures. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Hi, I'm a staff member. There is no training. I don't know where they got that idea. I've never had any kind of training about how to get along with people of different cultures here. I was raised to believe that we are all brothers and sisters, and I do try to practice that. However, I discovered a few years ago that I was prejudiced. I told a joke to my husband and his friend's wife that I thought was extremely funny. And they looked at me and said, "Oh, really?" They were all black. I'm black by marriage. I have a large black family that I'm a part of. So both my husband and I graduated from state. Me a long, long time ago, back in the dark ages, 58. Took him a little bit longer. He got out 72. I'm only 3 years older than him. He's gone now. Anyway, I just want to say that staff could do a lot, but we don't, because we have so much work to do. And we don't have time to come and do things like this or listen to things. I happen to work across the hall, so it was easy for me to roll over. And I said, good, I can finally go to something, you know. There's a lot of work to be done here on campus. And I look around my faculty and, good God, they don't have a clue. They really don't. And I don't think a lot of other staff have either. I mean, we've all been kicked around and had things happen to us, but that particular thing that we're discussing now, which was this ugly incident with the students, we really need to look at that. I would never send my child here, quite frankly. She took off and did her own thing. She went to Florida and went to school. You know, she loved it. But
sorry, your 3 minutes is up.
Okay,
Thank you so much. Next speaker, please.
Good evening. I'm Dr. Man. I'm a visiting scholar here from India. I reached last week and could join this meeting today. I'm standing before you in the capacity of a father. My two sons did their masters from here. They have now startups. Now, as a teacher, I'm a visiting scholar with this university for the last more than 4 years. I come for 10 weeks, 16 weeks, and whenever I'm required, I'm present here. thirdly, I am representing a Sikh community. As one of the speakers mentioned, we were prey to racial attacks in the guise of Osama bin Laden. And I wonder that this campus has this kind of unfortunate news. My two sons never complained about anything about a negative comment about their Asian origin or Indian origin or Sikh origin. I, being a turbaned professor here, I am interacting with hundreds of Indian students, Sikh students, and as a part of the Indian Diaspora Project here with the Silicon Valley Center for Global Innovation, we have 2 surveys in 2005 and 2006. And we have specifically mentioned the question of diversity and those surveys, and not a single student, I think out of 700 respondents, 600 respondents each year, they never outlined or registered any kind of such a negative comment about diversity. I wonder. So I suggest that let us be as a teachers, be as a parents, be as a community leaders. We should work together, not to give such a propaganda to an unintended incident, which I believe. So we should, this San Jose State is the heart and soul of Silicon Valley. And we have to take it to the heights of more glory.
Your 3 minutes
So,
is up. Your 3 minutes is up. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And let us work together.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Hello.
Hi.
A little dry mouth, so excuse me.
All right.
My name is Aaron Miller, Director of Internal Affairs at Associated Students. I was also an orientation leader this past summer, and I worked in the Office of Admissions as a student assistant as well as the information booth or enrollment services. So I think I have a pretty wide range of experiences here at San Jose State, and my experience has been a positive one. I'm a third year, I'm a junior, and maybe I got lucky with a good string of faculty members and staff members and other students, but it's been generally positive, which is different than the popular experience that we're talking about right now. And I think I choose to define San Jose State as this room, as people who are here to fix the problem, who really don't believe that negative things like racism and acts of violence are a good thing. This is just how I choose to view my experience here as a student. I really want to speak to students of color and actually students in general who are unfamiliar on how the university works and the different entities. If students really took the time to learn and take personal responsibility for their whole college career, I really think their experience would be different. A lot of students do, and I think those are the ones that make it out. So we're talking about campus climate here, so let me not get on a tangent. Campus climate is something that we all perceive on an individual basis, and Aaron Miller's perception of that is a generally positive one. And I don't mean to speak for all African-American students or students of color, but I want to say that you can have a good experience here at San Jose State University, but there is a lot that we can work on, and I think it's on every end. So, yeah, I think that pretty much sums it up.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Next speaker.
Thank you for listening to us today. I really appreciate to see this, and it means something. My name is Drew Johnson. I am a student representative on the Student Union Board of Directors, and I'm also a Salzburg Global Seminar Scholar. Excuse me. So as a student at San Jose State, and I'm sure this will jive with faculty and staff and just anyone who's ever experienced kind of the culture of San Jose State, there's the term or the phrase, we are a commuter campus. And so we always talk about how people come here, they go to class, and they go home. And not to dismiss at all the importance of talking about housing responsibilities and what the culture of housing is like. I don't mean to say that at all, but I think my point is the classroom really matters because a lot of students' experience is I come here, I go to class, and I go home. And so that hour and 15 minutes means something. For me, I have had a great experience in class. I've had professors who have, let me back up. As a white student, the classes that I have taken have told me not to be colorblind, but to embrace color and love diversity and thrive off of it. And so I get that experience day in and day out. And I love the community that has been formed in the classroom. And I have had that experience. And by the way, I am in the Humanities and Arts department. And so that's what my experience has been. But thinking about what we're doing here or what you guys are, have the task of doing, I think the problem of this campus and what we're dealing with, creating a culture of the classroom, extends way further. Because I have just found out that millions of dollars have been cut from the program that has taught me to love diversity and preach it and love it and accept it and just thrive off of it every day. And it's changed the way that I look at the world and look at individuals. It's a department that looks at every individual as someone who has intrinsic value and worth, and also sees that human beings can change and continue to change. And I think that's something that we need to think about, because that's what the classroom experience has been for me. And so we really need to look at why in the world are we cutting money for that program if we're trying to create this kind of climate that embraces diversity on this campus. That's all I have to say. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Good evening to the panel. I am not from the San Jose State community. My name is Stephanie Tang. I came down from San Francisco to this meeting. I've been following the news about how the campus is handling this incident ever since it happened. I work with Revolution newspaper, and I'm also an educator myself. And I just want to say that this really, truly hideous incident is so much bigger than just what happened at this one campus. It's really something that the incident here has ramifications that ring around the country. I'm sure you realize that at Ole Miss, something that's no different just happened. Someone hung a Confederate flag and a noose on the statue of James Meredith. And it's also no different what happened here from the murder of Jordan Davis and the message we just got given by that verdict that said that Black people have no rights that a white person is bound to respect. How old is that? I think that people here on this campus and in this community and all over this country have to stand up against this tidal wave that's being whipped up. And I brought you an invitation today to participate in something on February 26th around the country, which I'll explain before I'm finished. But we are in a time when the acquittal of George Zimmerman put off a green light for the white racists in this country. Not all white people, but for the people who support white supremacy. These people are being whipped up. Tens of millions of them think that their insecurities about the future can be taken out on others. And we know who the others are being defined as. And this incident made me absolutely ill when I read the particular factoid that these people used the epithet 3/5. Now, I personally am a revolutionary, and I know where 3/5 comes from, and it comes from the founding document of this society. So I don't think it's going to be easy to get rid of this kind of thinking and these kinds of activities. But I do think at this moment we should all stand up, and on February 26th, it is the second anniversary of the murder of Trayvon Martin, and there's a call for people all over the country to carry out a day of outrage and remembrance for Trayvon and all of the Black and Latino and other young people who are being told you have a target on your back and you're not safe in the entire country. So I invite everyone in this community to find a way to come together in public and to stand up. We're calling it Hoodies Up Day for Trayvon. And wherever you are, to say we're all Trayvon, the whole damn system's guilty, and the youth are not suspects. They are human beings. And I think it's so connected to the publicity that you have gotten because of this incident. And people have a chance, whether it's here or in Jacksonville. We're going to be in Oakland at Fruitvale BART at 4 o'clock to rally and march And that, as you know, is where Oscar Grant was killed. And we have a chance to say that this is not acceptable, this is not tolerable.
3 minutes is up. Thank you.
And we will stop it, and we'll
Thank you.
stand together to do that.
Thank you so much.
My name is,
Tilt the mic up.
yeah. My name is Robert Miller, and I want to start by thanking the committee for being here and all the work that you've done, and Dr. Mary. Also, I want to thank all the people in the audience because you're giving us your most valuable possession, your time. People could be somewhere else. People are here because they care. I'm here because I care. I'm a San Jose State alumni, class of '81, and I'm very proud of that fact. One of the things I liked about San Jose State was that it was so diverse back when I went there. However, I didn't grow up in this area. I'm a product of the East Coast. I grew up in Baltimore, an all-black neighborhood, and if you've ever watched The Wire, you've seen the places that I lived. I didn't voluntarily leave that environment. That was my comfort zone. And when you were talking about getting together and getting your hair cut, people you knew, what have you, that's the way I lived, and I was very happy there. I was forcibly removed by the United States military, and I give them very high marks in knowing how to drive out ignorance, fear, and prejudice. There's nothing like having somebody shooting at you to get your mind right as far as who's on your side and who's not, and you don't worry about what color they are, where they came from. So the thing that really helped me was knowledge and exposure and a lack of fear, driving fear out. Those are the things that help us. I was saddened, but I wasn't shocked when I saw what happened at San Jose State because, quite frankly, intolerance and bullying has been around since the Bible. If you don't believe me, just read it. However, we've evolved to a civilized society now, and as a civilized society, we should be able to drive out fear, and we should feel empowered, and we should be intelligent and knowledgeable. So what I look for from San Jose State is leadership. I look for leadership and education. The reason children come, or the reason young people come to San Jose State is to be educated. If they were educated, they wouldn't have to come here. They do things that are foolish, like the people did to this young man, because they're ignorant. It's your job as leaders, as administrators, as professors of San Jose State to drive out that ignorance and to educate young people when they come here. That's what their parents send them here for and pay money for them to come here for. I'm very proud of this school. I love this school, and I really want to see you become a model for teaching this generation of civilization about diversity. That's what I'm asking for. Really, that's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other speakers?
Hi. Hi, my name is Zain Ahmed. I am a student here on campus, a sophomore student, and I'm a gay Pakistani American man here on campus. I represent Queer and Asian here on campus, as well as South Asian Advocacy Group, this group Susan mentioned, my friend, and I want to add on to her point about the importance of South Asian and Middle Eastern representation here on campus. When I was in middle school, I got the terms terrorist onto me, and I wasn't validated as a person. And there was no one to talk about my issues. There was no one to help me through that, and there was no talk about Middle Eastern, South Asian disparities here in America. And I want to refer back to a conversation Susan and the first student that was up here had. And what if this student was someone of Bangladeshi descent? What if this student was me or my friend Susan? What would the conversation be then? As well as that, what if that student was a transgender student or a genderqueer student? Would there be any support for those kind of people? And as being involved in the queer community, I don't see any representation for trans students or genderqueer students. I don't see any talk about them or any discussion about them whatsoever. And if there is a future study on campus climate, I want to emphasize the importance of South Asian, Middle Eastern representation, as well as trans and genderqueer representation. Also, I think we should change how we teach history here on campus and across the board. I took Asian American Studies B here on campus, Asian American Studies A, and that whole semester was entirely just American history all over again, just like I did in high school. And I don't want to learn that all over again. I want to learn something new. I want to learn the Asian American perspectives here. And I think this also ties into the hate crime because the perpetrators use the term 3/5 against him. And that really goes to show that people don't actually care about what they're learning. People don't actually care about, the enslavement of African American people and the oppression they faced, because this term was applied onto the victim here. So I feel like people need to care more about history, and people need to care more about oppression, and we need to hear more about the perspectives of people of color in history, as well as African American people, as well as Middle Eastern, South Asian people, and as well as the queer community as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other speakers?
Yes, we do.
Let's go.
I'm not a student.
Go right ahead.
My name is Paul Lee. I'm the AS Print Shop manager. I graduated at San Jose State. I worked here for 27 years. Seen a lot of things. The print shop is located in the Hoover Hall. So the students are my neighbors. And I just want to come here to bring up some observation that I see, which is the RA's efforts to take care of the students. I really see a lot of great things happen in those dorms. We place a lot of responsibility on the RA. They are students. They don't have the parenthood, but they act like parents to all the kids around them. I see issues that students go up to the RA and say, I have these questions. What do you think? Some of those are like big questions. I don't know how to answer them. What kind of training do they have? Do we appreciate RA's efforts? How often that they come up with issues that they can't answer, but they have to deal with it. So those are the things that I think this committee might want to look into when we deal with the residents' lives. Those are the things I see on a daily basis. When a student need to be disciplined, the RA are doing a great job by not saying you can't or you don't, but they really spend time with them. And why do they have to take on that responsibility? How come that is happening on this campus that I don't know what's going on the other campus? I never experienced that. I never lived in the dorm. So I just want to bring that point up. Another point I want to bring up is when a question is brought up that do we have a will to change? I think a lot of our old timers here gave up. We see a lot of faculty, staff retire quietly. And those are the people that I see dedicated their life for this campus, 20, 30 years, and they're just gone. Their experience are lost. How can we capture the experience of the staff? Not just faculty, staff. Staff interact with students. We help them. How can we bring those experiences together to mold the campus climate? Those are the questions that I have. I wish something in my lifetime here that would change. But I've been waiting for a long time. I'm willing to do it. I know a lot of staff that...
3 minutes is up. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Good evening. I'm Ronald Williams, and I'm also an alumni of San Jose State University. And I had the extreme luck of being a student at San Jose State University when people like Nahandai Mera were here and Louis Bundy were here, and particularly during President Corrett's tenure. And during that time, President Corrett would actually have a roundtable of African-American people of the whole community regularly. Amina Williams, Urban League, many, many African Americans and people of culture. He met with them on a regular basis. And I came here during that tenure. And within that tenure, I became a Dean Scholar and inducted into the AS55 Club and an outstanding academic student on the honor roll many, many, many times. Chairperson for the Student Health Advisory Committee, president of the Black Student Union, and on every climate committee practically that there were, and an award-winning student outreach and recruitment employee for student outreach and recruitment. And my job was to go to the East Side, have assemblies for student outreach and recruitment, and also as BSU president, have assemblies for African Americans, and actually bring them to campus. I brought hundreds of them to campus at a time, 200 or 300 at a time. But that stopped. That ceased to be something that happened. During my tenure when President Correct was here, there was a certain amount of adequate amounts of EOP, and there were resources available and a priority spent on getting African American students to this campus. And again, I went to the East Side, I talked to the principals, I had them, Latinos, African Americans brought to assemblies. I showed them how to fill out their paperwork, how to get financial aid. I did the same thing at Foothill College. I did the same thing at De Anza College, and that was my job. And I was successful in that job. And when I was here, when I was doing that, there were 3,000 or 4,000 African American students. Now I believe you have maybe the late hundreds, maybe you have 900. So it's extremely important what flows from the top. And when President Correct was here, there was a significant amount of importance placed on having the community sitting at a round table just like this. He had it in his office, and would all be sitting there. And I mean, it was just impressive. And if there was some problem, that community got together, they focused on it.
Your 3 minutes is up.
Thank you for the time.
All right, thank you.
I'm Jethro Moore, President, San Jose Silicon Valley NAACP. It's good to see Dr. Wilson's report. I've had it for a couple of months. But to look at also to understand the WASP report that came out before that report spoke very directly and candidly to this school and this campus about what corrections needed to be made, yet they were ignored. That is problematic in itself. The WASP report clearly said that no programs, but to do something that would substantially change on this campus. Don't take any more surveys, don't get any more things going on, but do something that would affect change, and nothing happened. Then we have the Susan Wilson report, which rained down from
Murray,
Susan Murray, I'm sorry, but the report comes down, and somewhere that cuts out and doesn't get out to the masses of people. This problem is all the way down into the employees who work in the cafeteria, who feel they've been passed over, and others have been brought in to be in charge of them, and they have not looked at. The problem on this campus is deep, and the fact that they continually to ignore the history that is San Jose State and its civil rights movement. The history, the fact that on this campus, the internment of Japanese students or people happen right here is constantly ignored. There is nothing that resembles a history that would bring all this together. If San Jose State has a niche in this market between Stanford and Berkeley, and that is this rich civil rights history that they continue to try to bury. Bury it by the destruction of the track team. Bury it by not recruiting African Americans and Latinos to come to the school. There is a problem here that must be addressed. To make it complacent, I was just upset when they said this was complacent by the young man for not seeking help. There was no help on the website for him. If you went to this website, nowhere on the website was there someplace to report hate crimes. That's all reflects back on who's sitting there and who's putting the stuff out for the students. So when we look at the problem, we look at this young man in engineering all by himself, a black man studying hard to do something, and because he did not act according to the stereotypical black man persona, he's considered to be complacent. Where, to be honest, if it would have probably been me, I'd have just rolled out and went to the east side and came back with some homies. we'd have straightened out the problem on that whole floor. But see, I'm not an engineering student. I was here as a media, as an advertising student. That was when we had a school paper that was responsive.
3
but
minutes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That was something, and I do feel that way, that things are getting swept under the carpet. This is my first trip to San Jose State. I live in Mountain View. It's the land of Google. I read the paper, and I am so angry that this has been allowed to kind of slide by. Obviously, it's not sliding by here, but the administrative people, the people that can make a change in policy, I want to see something happen. And to herd people into a room and do diversity treatment is fine as far as it goes, but we have to go beyond that. I don't think it's enough to talk to people about their feelings, et cetera. We have to do more than that. And the timeline for this ugly incident, if you were to draw it out, so much time went by before the realization of this was in the conscious mind. So much time went by. So there are people that could act, could make policy, and they're not. I mean, this is what I'm reading. I'm not a student here, obviously. Anyway, that's it for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other speakers this evening? All right, we have one final speaker. Right ahead.
My name is Mulugeta Hapte Gabriel, and I attended San Jose State a long time ago. And I experienced the same kind of issues. The only concern I have is when the professor talked about the intention of the question as far as whether you belong here in this classroom or not. I felt like she minimized the intention. You know, professors don't ask you because you look like you're lost. They ask you because you look certain color. When I attended San Jose State, I was the only black computer science student in the classroom. And I was asked at the maths class and the computer science class. But I took general education, psychology, African American history, or public speaking. Nobody asked me whether I belong to that class. They assumed that, yes, you know, those are the kind of classes African American take. So I didn't face that kind of questioning. And the questioning I faced at the computer science class, it didn't last until we took our first test. After the first test, the professor found out that I really belong to that class. He started asking about my opinion about subject matter. He knew that I have to prove myself to him that I belong to that class. Until he seen my exam result, he was doubting that, you know, I belong to that classroom. It shouldn't be that way. When you talk about white groups don't have their own groups, we celebrate black history, white history every day, 365 days a year. You know, the mainstream media celebrate the white history, the white culture, TV, the movies, and everywhere. That's why, you know, these communities, you know, community of color, they decided that they have a need to get together and celebrate their culture. They're waving their hand. We're still living here, and we have culture. When a black man walks on the street, the black man is not judged by the black culture. We're judged by the white culture. Do we fit or we broke the white culture? So we have to try to celebrate our own culture and let other people know that this is our culture. And we respect that, and we got to be respected. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So we've now concluded the public forum. We've had a total of 19 speakers this evening. We will have another public forum, and our task force will determine when that will happen. I'm going to adjourn this meeting with the proviso that our next meeting is Thursday, March 6th at 5:30 in this location. Our topic will be residential life program here at San Jose State. I will notify our task force members and the public of those who will present to us. I envision a panel that's representative, so that can give us all the information we will need. So we'll be able to ask questions, and then we'll decide, in fact, maybe we can discuss that in the next 4 minutes, if you want to use one half of that first hour for the residential, is it residential life or life program? Is that right? And then the second half for another public forum, or do you want to do something different? Let's have a little input. We have about 4 minutes. Ellen?
I have a question. I do, in addressing your question, I think it would be helpful to have public forum, but also just in terms of the process today, the index cards, is that gonna, those that wrote their questions, are we gonna incorporate that and add to the 19 that spoke in public?
So we have index cards. I don't know if we have any that were filled out from people who did not want to speak. When we get them, we'll put them in and we'll ask.
I think there were some, yeah.
Sure. I'll ask the assistants of staff to review those.
Okay.
We can somehow, maybe I can write them up and then kind of give them out, send it out in email so you know what issues were commented on.
That would be
All right?
helpful.
I will do that.
The other thing in addressing the housing coming next time, I'm wondering, because I recognize that several folks here, we didn't have a lot of chance to read through the report last time, and it seems like there were a lot in the exhibits that helped answer some of that, I believe. So I don't know if there's specific additional information that they could send us in preparation for the next meeting as well, so that we could read in advance too. If there were some yeah.
Well, I'll certainly check with staff, but I know there's a ton of information contained in the exhibits in the appendix that deal with the residential living program. But if there's more, then we can send it out via email. Okay, so I'll make a note to follow up. All right, so what is the sense about having the meeting a full 2 hours with that, or 1 hour, and then opening up to the public? Need some feedback. Yes.
My thoughts on that specifically, I think what might be helpful for me, I like the way today's forum worked. However, I don't know if the residential life individuals, if they do a presentation, if they'll be able to address the questions that I have just in a general presentation. So would it be helpful if, for example, we had everybody submit the questions to you, the residential life presenters could then address all those questions and then use the second half hour to do any follow-up on the questions, and then open up the final hour to the individuals from the community. I would very much like to hear from the community in terms of students' experience in the halls, so I think that could be done.
So let me understand what you're saying. So you're saying have a presentation where we get information. Also, if there's something that I can email out, meaning documentation to read, have that in advance, and then what do you want to do after that?
Well, no, we pre-send the questions to you so that they come prepared to answer all of our questions in the first 30 minutes.
So I got it. So questions get sent out, so they're prepared to come in and address those. And then you'd like to see the second hour having input from public? That's your view. Okay, other feedback, Chris?
Given the fact that we have 2-hour meeting time frames, and it sounds like a lot of time, but it's really not. I think it's been great to hear the public forum and the public comment. I just want to make sure that we don't wind up with too limited of amount of time with some of the folks from residential life, because while I definitely have some questions that I can prepare in advance, I envision that as they speak and as they talk, it will allow me to generate more questions. And I want to make sure that we have enough of a chance while we have them here to be able to kind of glean as much information out as possible. Okay. And part of the reason being that it might not be practical for us to ask them to come twice.
Okay. So your view is have the entire meeting devoted to that with the discussion with those who may come. Is that it?
Yes, and
okay.
It's not that I want to cut out the public forum discussion, but maybe we can do something like have cards on questions, and then maybe take the last 20 minutes or something like that.
We can have actually another public forum where we could devote a meeting to input from the public on all sorts of things. So we're not going to exclude the public's input at all. So, okay, so your view is just devote the entire meeting, and we can send questions ahead, but of course have more questions as they come up. Delorme?
Yeah, I support the idea of us presenting questions in advance. I think it'll help to direct their presentation to us. and it won't be just kind of going off fuzzily.
Okay.
And then they can also make their remarks, and then during the meeting, we might have some additional
Sure.
questions.
Okay, so your view is the same as Chris's on that.
Right.
Anybody else? Because I'm developing a consensus. Willie?
The issue that brought us all together happened in residential life halls, and that's why.
Can you turn that up,
Well, I
please?
can-
Is mic
you
up,
can hear
please?
without this,
No, use the mic, so you're in the back.
And so there's
That's
obviously a rationale for focusing on residential life. But as you were listening and reading, I don't think residential life is the sole source of the kinds of concerns that are being raised. And so while I have no problem giving 2 hours worth of discussion on residential life, I think, excuse me, that there are other areas of campus, other departments that we'd like to get their sense, because I think what we're trying to get at are, 2 things. A sense of the issue so we can make recommendations on improving them, and a sense of the specifics of the case that brought us here so that they can be aimed at, addressing some of the things that were or weren't in place that allowed, that kind of thing to occur. So I just don't want the focus, from my perspective, just to be on
That's
residential
fine.
life.
I agree, and I don't think that's the intent of any of us. I think the idea was to focus a meeting on this because it is a big issue.
Right,
It is a
but I
big
was just
issue.
saying, we only have, what, 6 or 6
Well,
meetings or
we're
something?
gonna have to figure out how to do this, but I think it's worth the time on this residential life. I'd like to hear from students. It's the 2 of you that are here, 3. Just give me your, Gabrielle.
Yeah, I totally agree with what Mr. Cox said.
Okay. Diana?
I brought up in the first meeting, are we going to have any talk about the orientation process itself?
That's all part of the residential living. We want to bring that up. At
That's
least
not just residential.
That's part of my focus.
The-
So,
The
go ahead.
orientation is, I think, go ahead, I think you can
Yeah,
explain it.
it's separate. I mean,
Has
it's
nothing to do with
similar.
residential living program?
They do, some of them run it, but it's actually a separate program, I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
It is
Some
for
of
all
them run it.
students. It is all, for all students, not just students living in the dorms.
Okay, so, are you saying, so do you want to deal with orientation in this next meeting?
Well, I don't know if that's possible. I'm just wondering, do we want to include that in the next meeting or after?
That's kind of along the lines of something that I was thinking, is
Okay.
that residential life, we are very much focused on the students, obviously. And so orientation and student-oriented programs around diversity seems like that could broaden
Separate.
what happens in the 2 hours, and perhaps even allow some time for the committee to use the information we get to start talking about recommendations in that specific area. I don't know
So
about that
you're
part.
you're suggesting we cover residential life and then also cover orientation and other student programs that deal with, what, cultural sensitivity, diversity? Is that what you're
Diversity
saying?
and it actually, the list would be long of who would be great resources, and I'm sure others would have some suggestions. But I think to broaden it beyond, I think residential life is crucial. I think
Sure.
we're all on that page.
Right,
But I
okay.
think.
So do
to
you want
ex- to
half the
expand it.
meeting to be residential living, the other half then to deal with the orientation and those kinds of programs? An hour for each? Okay, Gary?
In regards to residential life, I just want to emphasize that there needs to be some type of serious outreach to students in housing. If I'm not mistaken, the last report was done in 2006. That's a very long time ago. There needs to be some type of, we need to hear from students from housing right now so we can understand what's going on in 2014. Just want to emphasize
Okay,
that.
so where are you on what we should be doing at the next meeting?
Public, I want to make sure that proper outreach is done to students that live in housing for the public forum portion.
Right, but I don't know that we're going to have a public forum portion that particular meeting. So I get you. I understand exactly what we need to do as far as the outreach and making sure these issues that most directly impact students understand that, so we hope the turnout will be here. The question is, for the next meeting, we know we're going to talk about residential life. Do we want to have an additional subjects?
I
Yes,
think-
Peter. I'm sorry, Gary, go ahead, finish up.
I believe that we should allow as much time to pick the residential life coordinator's brains as possible.
All right, so yours is like, make that the meeting?
Yes.
All right.
That would be my
Peter.
suggestion.
Yeah, so a little bit more about orientation. So I know I was an orientation leader this past summer as well. I know for a fact that they have a little bit of a staff change in orientation this year, so it might be helpful to get somebody from the orientation staff as well, because they just got a new coordinator. So we're talking a little bit about changing the programming potentially to involve something regarding diversity. So I think it'd be fruitful to have someone from the orientation staff, not just a student, but someone, one of the coordinators there too.
Right, but do we want to do that at the next meeting? So I'm back to, do we want to spend the next meeting on residential life? If we do, then the next meeting after that is March 20th. We can take up that issue, the orientation and other classes. Then we have 2 meetings left. And the whole purpose is to come out of that last meeting, April 17th, with recommendations. And by the way, all along as we're meeting, you should be jotting down recommendation ideas, because that's how we're going to pull all this together. That's what I've been doing. All right, Maria.
Since the members of our task force do not seem to know a lot about residential life, and
I know
residential
nothing.
life is at the core of this issue, I think it might be a good idea to devote the next meeting to residential life, and I doubt that it will be a linear conversation. I think because there's so much more to it, I think we will contextualize the conversation.
All right, getting a sense, Anthony?
I would just say that we can focus on residence life. You mentioned the calendar for the remaining meetings after leading up to the 17th. And what we heard today and what we know about what occurred is it's really about the campus climate. It's about all the issues that impact the students. While this was in housing, we need to make sure we allow ample time to talk about the big issues. And Judge, I know you know this, it's the elephant in the room. So we just have to be able to
And that's
allow
what we've been
time
doing.
for it.
We're doing it today.
No,
This is how we're going to
I understand that,
keep
but I
working
just want
it.
to make sure that
Sure.
we just don't focus so narrowly that we don't get to some of the more important things that we need to down
Sure.
the stretch and not cut that short.
Absolutely. So, we're looking at the micro, what happened, this specific incident, which brings up the whole residential life program, but we're also looking at the macro, right? All the factors that gave rise to that, but that also talks about campus climate. So here's what we're going to do. Next meeting is going to be devoted to residential life program, and your questions you will email to me by next Friday, and I'll send you an email on all this so that we can get those questions out. And then I envision, and I'll have to talk to staff who are helping me with these meetings, who will be here. We need people with the information that can give us all of this, and a representative body. We will not have a public forum on that meeting. This will be 2 hours. We're going to get very familiar with this and then try to work through recommendations on that. And then we're going to move to the 2 bigger issues, right? Keep doing it. So if is everybody okay with that? We're good? All right, so I will adjourn this meeting, and thank you all so much. We'll see you in 2 weeks.